The Lost Voyage of Amelia Earhart. The sky beckons. The fire of ambition often begins as a quiet spark. For Amelia Earhart, that spark was born under the open skies of Kansas, long before the world ever knew her name. She was born in 1897 in the small town of Atchison. Her childhood was wild and free. She climbed trees, raced through fields, and ignored every expectation of how a young lady was supposed to behave. People called her unusual, but Amelia was never interested in fitting in. She was interested in feeling alive. When she saw her first airplane at a local fair, she hardly noticed it. It was dusty, fragile, nothing special. But years later, when she finally felt the wind lift a plane beneath her for the first time, something inside her shifted forever. The ground no longer belonged to her. The sky did. In the roaring 20s, aviation was still dangerous and thrilling, a dance between courage and death. Men like Charles Lindbergh had become national heroes, their names written in the clouds. For women, flying was considered impossible, even foolish. Amelia ignored that. She earned her pilot's license in 1923, becoming one of the few women in the world to do so. Her instructor remembered her as calm, focused, and unafraid, as though she had always belonged above the earth. By 1932, Amelia had written her name into history. She became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Alone in her red Lockheed Vega, she battled freezing winds, engine problems, and exhaustion. For 14 hours, the ocean stretched endlessly beneath her. When she finally landed in a quiet Irish field, villagers ran to her plane, astonished. She smiled through the cold and said simply, "I did it." America erupted in celebration. Newspapers called her Lady Lindy, and she became a symbol of freedom and courage. But Amelia never saw herself as a celebrity. She saw herself as a student of the skies, always learning, always searching for what lay beyond the horizon. Her fame grew, and so did her dreams. She married George Putnam, a publisher who understood that her heart would always belong to the wind. Together they planned flights, books, and lectures. Yet behind every smile and headline, Amelia felt the same quiet pull she'd always felt, the horizon calling her forward. She began to dream of one final journey, to fly around the entire world. Not just around continents, but along the equator, the longest route possible. It would be a flight of nearly 29,000 miles across oceans, jungles, deserts, and storms. A flight no woman had ever dared to attempt. In 1937, her dream began to take shape. She chose her aircraft carefully, a sleek, silver Lockheed Electra 10E, equipped with the latest navigation tools, extra fuel tanks, and twin engines powerful enough to carry her across the globe. She called it the Flying Laboratory. Every instrument, every gauge, every chart was studied with precision. People asked her, "Aren't you afraid?" She smiled and said, "Please know I am quite aware of the hazards. I want to do it because I want to do it." Her words were calm, but her spirit was unshakable. She was not chasing fame. She was chasing fulfillment, that rare feeling of living at the edge of possibility. In late May 1937, she took off from California, flying east. Her path stretched across the Caribbean, down through South America, over the Atlantic to Africa, and across the vast Indian Ocean. At every stop, crowds gathered. Children brought flowers. Women waved flags and shouted her name. Reporters asked endless questions, but Amelia's eyes were always fixed on the next horizon. By the end of June, she reached Lae in Papua New Guinea. From there, only one leg of the journey remained, the longest and most dangerous, the Pacific crossing to Howland Island, a tiny patch of land no bigger than a few city blocks, surrounded by thousands of miles of water. It was July 2nd, 1937. The weather looked uncertain, but she was determined. Together with her navigator, Fred Noonan, she prepared for takeoff. Maps were reviewed, fuel tanks filled. A final photograph was taken, Amelia smiling in her flight jacket beside her Electra, unaware that it would be one of the last images ever captured of her. As the engines roared to life, she waved goodbye. The crowd cheered. The plane lifted smoothly from the runway and disappeared into the vast blue of the morning sky. That flight would vanish into legend. But before the silence, before the mystery, there was the courage of a woman who believed the world could be smaller, kinder, and connected, if only someone was brave enough to fly across it. The story of her final journey was about to begin. Into the Pacific, the final flight. The sun rose over the Pacific on July 2, 1937, warm and golden, touching the metal wings of Amelia Earhart's silver Electra. She and her navigator, Fred Noonan, had been awake since before dawn, checking charts, listening to weather reports, and calculating fuel weight with careful precision. The airfield in Lae, Papua New Guinea, buzzed quietly with the sound of mechanics and local workers. But beyond the edges of the runway stretched a calm blue ocean that seemed endless. Howland Island, their next destination, lay nearly 2,600 miles away. A speck in the Pacific, no more than a narrow strip of coral, surrounded by open sea. It was small enough that, even under the best conditions, missing it by just a few miles could mean disaster. Amelia had been warned about this leg of the journey. Even experienced navigators feared the Pacific crossing. The island was so isolated that only the U.S. Coast Guard ship Itasca would be nearby, waiting to guide her in by radio. But Amelia was calm. Her confidence came not from arrogance, but from preparation. The same steady determination that had carried her across the Atlantic years before. At 10 a.m., her Electra began to roll down the runway. The twin engines roared as the plane lifted gracefully into the air. The people of Lae watched as the aircraft disappeared into the bright morning sky, silver wings shrinking to a dot, then vanishing into the horizon. For the first few hours, everything seemed perfect. Amelia's radio messages came through clearly. She reported good weather, a steady course, and no trouble with the engines. Fred Noonan, skilled in celestial navigation, tracked their path by sun and stars, using his sextant to fix their position. But as the day wore on, clouds began to form. The vast Pacific was unpredictable, a mirror one moment, a storm the next. As they flew eastward, radio operators on the Itasca prepared to receive them. They expected the Electra to appear by early morning, guided by direction signals and radio beacons. But the signals were faint, scattered with static. Communication was difficult. Frequencies mismatched and messages overlapped. Still, Amelia's voice was heard, calm, professional, and clear. "We are on course." "Everything's okay so far." Hours passed. The Itasca's crew scanned the sky. They listened, adjusted dials, and watched the horizon. But no plane appeared. Then, just before 8:45 a.m., a transmission broke through the static. Amelia's voice again, still steady, but carrying a note of urgency. "We must be on you, but cannot see you. Gas is running low." The message crackled and faded. The operators tried to reply, but she never seemed to hear them. Minutes later came her final known words. "We are on the line 157-337. We will repeat this message. We are running north and south." Then silence. The world would never hear from Amelia Earhart again. Somewhere in the vast Pacific, her silver plane vanished. No distress signal, no wreckage, no clue. Just the whisper of radio static and the echo of her calm, determined voice. The Itasca began searching immediately. Ships and planes scoured the area for days, tracing possible flight paths, scanning the ocean for any sign of debris. But the sea gave nothing back. It was as if the sky had opened and the ocean had swallowed her whole. In the following weeks, newspapers across America carried her picture on the front page. Millions hoped she might have landed on a remote island, waiting for rescue. Others feared the worst. President Franklin D. Roosevelt ordered one of the largest naval searches in history, over 60 ships and planes covering hundreds of thousands of square miles. Nothing was found. For many, her disappearance was a tragedy, but for others it was a mystery that refused to die. Some believed her Electra had run out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. Others argued she had veered off course and landed on an uninhabited island, perhaps Nikumaroro, then known as Gardner Island. Decades later, explorers would find fragments of metal, pieces of glass, even a woman's shoe, clues that might have belonged to her. But the evidence was never certain. There were darker theories too, that she had been captured by Japanese forces, mistaken for a spy during a time of rising tensions in the Pacific. Some claimed she had survived the war, living under a different name in secret. Each theory carried its own kind of truth and its own kind of hope. Yet what endures most is not the mystery of her death, but the brilliance of her courage. She had flown where few men dared to go, and she had done it not for fame, but for the belief that the world could be united through flight. Her disappearance became legend. Her name, whispered in classrooms, documentaries, and bedtime stories, came to mean more than a single event. It became a symbol of human curiosity, bravery, and the eternal search for what lies beyond the horizon. As night settled across the Pacific that day, the stars reflected softly on the ocean's surface. Somewhere beneath those stars, Amelia Earhart's journey ended, but her story never did. The Pacific. The vanishing point, the morning of July 2nd, 1937, dawned bright over Lae, New Guinea. Amelia Earhart stood beside her silver Lockheed Electra, sunlight glinting off the polished metal. The world flight had taken her more than 20,000 miles already, across continents, oceans, and time zones. Now, she faced one of the longest, most dangerous stretches of the journey, from Lae to Howland Island, a tiny dot in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Howland was barely 2 miles long, flat, low, and nearly invisible from the air. U.S. coast. Guard cutter Itasca waited near the island, radio-tuned, ready to guide her in. Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan studied their charts carefully. They loaded the plane with extra fuel, over 1,100 gallons, but despite all preparation, one mistake in direction, one delay in signal, could mean disaster. At 10 a.m., Earhart's Electra lifted off the runway at Lae. The engines roared, straining under the heavy load. The plane climbed slowly into the sky, heading east. The world listened. It was the last leg before glory, the final step in a journey that would make her immortal. For hours they flew over endless blue water. No ships, no islands, only the vast Pacific stretching in every direction. Radio operators on Itasca picked up faint messages. Cloudy weather, partly cloudy, overcast. Then, we must be on you, but cannot see you. The signals were weak, scattered by distance and atmosphere. Itasca transmitted back again and again, but Earhart couldn't hear them clearly. As the hours passed, tension built. They were running low on fuel. The last confirmed message came at 8:43 a.m., Howland time. We are running north and south. Then, silence. No more words, no more sound, just the quiet hum of the Pacific. The plane vanished into history. In the days that followed, the greatest search in aviation history began. U.S. Navy ships, aircraft, and submarines scoured the ocean. Nothing. No wreckage, no signal, no trace. It was as if the sky itself had swallowed them. Amelia Earhart, the most famous aviator of her time, had disappeared, and with her, the dream of completing the first female flight around the world. Yet her legend was only beginning. Theories, secrets, and the great search, the disappearance of Amelia Earhart, became more than just a mystery. It became an obsession. In the weeks after her final transmission, America held its breath. Newspapers printed bold headlines: Earhart vanishes over Pacific. Search continues, no trace found. Families gathered around radios every night, hoping for news. But the ocean stayed silent. The U.S. Navy's search operation was massive. Over 60 aircraft, 9 ships, and 4,000 men scouring 250,000 square miles of the Pacific. For days, they flew grid patterns, watching the endless water below. Some claimed to see oil slicks. Others thought they spotted small islands or floating debris. But no proof ever came. Then began the theories, each one more fascinating and more mysterious than the last. The first theory was the simplest, that Earhart's plane ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean near Howland Island. The Pacific is deep there, over 18,000 feet. A wreck could easily vanish forever beneath the waves. Many experts still believe this is what happened. The second theory captured the public imagination, that she had landed on a remote coral atoll, Nikumaroro Island, then called Gardner Island, about 350 miles south of Howland. In 1940, a British officer found a partial human skeleton, a woman's shoe, and a small box once used to hold a sextant. Could this have been Amelia's final resting place? Recent DNA tests have been inconclusive, but the mystery endures. The third theory was far darker and deeply tied to the political tension of the era. Some believed Amelia and Fred Noonan had been captured by Japanese forces after accidentally landing in the Marshall Islands. According to this story, they were taken as prisoners and later executed. In the years after World War II, American soldiers stationed in the Pacific claimed they'd heard locals mention a woman flyer held by the Japanese. Yet no solid evidence ever emerged. A fourth theory, whispered but never proven, suggested something more secretive, that Amelia's flight had been part of a U.S. spy mission. Her route crossed key areas of Japanese interest in the Pacific. Some speculated she was gathering intelligence under the cover of her world flight. The truth, if there was one, remains buried in classified archives and fading memories. Through the decades, countless searches have tried to solve the mystery, from sonar scans to underwater drones, from island excavations to archival research, all searching for a ghost from 1937. Each expedition brings fragments, bits of metal, a zipper pull, a radio part, but never the final answer. Perhaps the Pacific doesn't want to give up its secret. Perhaps the mystery itself is what keeps her story alive, forever flying, forever just beyond the horizon. Legacy, spirit, and eternal flight. In the decades that followed her disappearance, Amelia Earhart transformed from a pilot into a legend. Though she vanished from the skies, her spirit never faded. Instead, it became part of the world's imagination, a symbol of courage, curiosity, and the human desire to explore the unknown. For Americans in the late 1930s, the loss of Amelia was more than just a mystery. It felt personal. She had been a national hero, a woman who dared to do what no one else would. In an age when most believed women should stay grounded, she rose into the clouds. Her courage inspired millions, especially young girls, to believe they could dream just as high. Schools, airports, and scholarships were named after her. Statues were built in her honor. Her words continued to echo through generations. The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity. In the 1960s and 70s, when women's rights movements surged across the United States, Amelia's story found new life. She became a symbol of independence, proof that bravery knows no gender. Every time a new woman pilot took flight, every time a boundary was crossed, Amelia's invisible wings seemed to lift the world just a little higher. Even today, explorers and researchers continue the search for her plane, not just to solve a mystery, but to touch a piece of history that still feels alive. Her story is retold in documentaries, books, and classroom lessons, reminding new generations that some journeys never end. Some say she crashed into the Pacific. Some say she lived out her final days on an island. But perhaps, in a deeper sense, Amelia never disappeared at all. She simply kept flying, across oceans, through time, and into the hearts of those who still look to the sky and whisper her name. As the firelight fades and the world grows quiet, her voice still echoes, steady, calm, and unafraid. A reminder that courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to keep moving forward despite it. The mystery remains unsolved, but her legacy is eternal. Amelia Earhart, forever in flight. Echoes across time. The search continues. Decades have passed since Amelia Earhart vanished into the Pacific sky, yet her story continues to evolve, as if she's still calling out across the radio waves of history. In the modern era, technology has turned mystery into a challenge. Oceanographers, scientists and explorers armed with sonar drones and satellite imaging have joined the search. Every few years, a new expedition sets sail, each one claiming to be closer than ever to the truth. In 2012, deep-sea explorers launched a mission to find her Lockheed Electra near Nikumaroro Island. They used remote submarines to scan the ocean floor. Among the coral and sand, they discovered strange metallic fragments shaped like aircraft panels. The world held its breath again. Could this be Amelia's plane? But after months of analysis, the evidence remained uncertain, hauntingly close but never enough. In 2018, another search vessel mapped the area with high-resolution sonar. The scans revealed what looked like wreckage resting nearly 18,000 feet below the surface. But once again, weather and funding ended the mission before it could confirm the find. The Pacific keeps its secrets well. Meanwhile, historians uncovered long-forgotten records, blurry photographs, military reports, and witness accounts from Pacific Islanders. One image from 1937 showed a dock with a man and woman in the background. Some believed it was Amelia and Fred Noonan, alive after the world had given up on them. Others dismissed it as coincidence, yet perhaps the real meaning of her story isn't about where her plane lies, but why people still look for it. Her disappearance became more than a question of what happened. It became a mirror for human curiosity, our endless desire to uncover truth. Every new generation rediscovers her name. Every new pilot who lifts off carries a piece of her courage. Every dreamer who refuses to give up walks the same path she once carved through the clouds. Somewhere, out beyond the horizon, the Pacific still whispers with wind and wave, a lullaby for a woman who dared to touch the edge of the world. Amelia Earhart remains not just a mystery, but a promise that no dream is too distant, no sky too wide, and no disappearance final. Her story isn't about loss. It's about flight that never ends. The spirit of the sky. Amelia's modern legacy. More than 80 years after her disappearance, Amelia Earhart's presence still hovers over the world, not as a ghost, but as a guiding star. She became more than an aviator. She became a symbol of possibility. In every pilot who lifts off into an uncertain sky, there's a whisper of Amelia's courage. In every explorer who challenges limits, there's an echo of her voice saying, "Adventure is worthwhile in itself." Her story now belongs to history, and to every dreamer who has ever looked upward. Across America, her name is woven into the landscape. Schools, airports, scholarships, and museums keep her memory alive. But more than that, her spirit fuels a movement, one that says curiosity is sacred and courage is endless. In Kansas, where she was born, visitors still walk the halls of the Amelia Earhart Birthplace Museum, her childhood home overlooking the Missouri River. There, her story begins again for each person who steps through the door. You can almost imagine a young girl standing by her window, eyes lifted to the sky, dreaming of flight before airplanes were common. In classrooms, teachers tell her story not as a tragedy, but as a triumph, a reminder that progress is built by those who dare to fail. In the world of aviation, her name continues to inspire women pilots through organizations like the 99s, the very group she helped found in 1929 to support female aviators. In 2023, NASA honored her legacy by naming one of their advanced drones after her, Earhart. It was built for long-range atmospheric research, soaring at heights where only silence and stars remain. Amelia's dream of reaching beyond boundaries now stretches even into space. Every generation finds a new reason to rediscover her. Her life reminds us that greatness doesn't require perfection, only purpose. That mystery isn't always tragedy. Sometimes it's eternal life through wonder. And so, as another night falls and the quiet crackle of a fireplace fills the room, her journey continues. The sky she once crossed now belongs to countless others, but her trail of light remains, unbroken, untamed, and eternal. Somewhere, above the waves and clouds, she still flies, not lost, but free. Across the stars, Earhart's symbolism in space and the future of flight. The story of Amelia Earhart doesn't end with the ocean or the sky. It stretches into the cosmos. What began as a human attempt to conquer the winds has now become a journey to conquer the stars. When astronauts speak of their inspirations, Amelia's name often comes first. Her courage was not confined to altitude. It was about expanding what humanity believed was possible. The skies she once braved are now only the first chapter of a larger story, the story of exploration itself. In the 1960s, when NASA sent its first astronauts into space, many compared them to pioneers like Earhart and Lindbergh. They too risked everything to go where no one had gone before. The difference was simply altitude, from 30,000 feet to 300,000 miles. Yet the spirit was the same. In 2025, as technology pushes us toward Mars and beyond, Amelia's voice still echoes in the dream of flight. She represents the first step in that long chain of human daring. The idea that we can always go further, higher, deeper into the unknown. Every space capsule, every rover, every telescope pointed at the stars carries a bit of her essence. The curiosity that made her chase horizons lives on in the minds of scientists, engineers, and dreamers who now reach for other worlds. Imagine Amelia standing today beneath the night sky, watching as rockets cut through the atmosphere. She would not see them as strange machines, but as continuations of her own journey, a new generation of explorers, reaching for the same infinite horizon she once chased in her silver Electra, and in that sense, she never truly vanished. She simply ascended from the Pacific sky to the cosmic sea. Her story reminds us that the universe itself is a vast ocean, and humanity will always build ships to sail across it. Amelia Earhart was one of the first navigators of that dream, her compass not just set by stars, but by imagination. As the firelight fades and the last embers glow, we are left with her timeless message: adventure is worthwhile. From the clouds of Earth to the silence of space, her journey continues, endless, boundless, eternal. Whispers of the Pacific, new discoveries and the unending search, the Pacific Ocean, silent, vast and unknowable, still holds the echoes of Amelia Earhart's flight. For nearly 9 decades, the world has searched its waves and islands, chasing fragments of her final hours. Yet the mystery remains, both haunting and beautiful. In recent years, new clues have begun to surface. Each one, like a whisper carried on ocean winds, pulls us closer to her story. In 2019, deep-sea explorer Robert Ballard, the same man who found the Titanic, launched an ambitious mission to locate Amelia's Lockheed Electra near Nikumaroro Island. His team used advanced sonar and underwater robots to scan the ocean floor for miles. For weeks they mapped coral ridges and trenches, the landscape of her possible final landing. They found shapes, debris, and hints of wreckage, but the sea guarded its secret once again. The expedition ended without confirmation, yet something profound remained, the sense that Amelia was still out there, just beyond human reach. In 2021, satellite imagery revealed what some researchers believe could be the outline of her plane's fuselage, hidden beneath shallow reef waters. Others dismissed it as natural rock formation. But the debate only fueled more determination. Private research groups, funded by historians and pilots, have continued to explore. Each expedition is a combination of science and faith, guided by data, driven by awe. One diver described it perfectly. It feels like she's close, like the ocean is watching us, testing if we're worthy to find her. The fascination isn't just about finding a plane, it's about connection between past and present, between those who dare and those who remember. Amelia's story became a mirror in which people see their own hopes and fears, the fear of the unknown and the hope of transcending it. Each time a new photograph emerges or a signal flickers on a radar screen, hearts race again. People gather online, in museums, in classrooms, wondering if this will finally be the moment, the answer to a mystery that has refused to fade. Yet perhaps the mystery is the answer. Perhaps what makes her story eternal is not discovery, but the search itself. The endless human urge to reach for what lies just beyond the horizon. And so, the Pacific still whispers. In the hush between waves, in the shimmer of moonlight on water, there's a sense that Amelia's journey never truly ended. She is still flying, through time, through history, through us. The eternal horizon, what Amelia Earhart means today. Time has moved forward, decades have passed, yet the name Amelia Earhart still carries the same quiet power it did in 1937. She is no longer just a figure of the past. She has become a timeless symbol of courage, mystery, and human spirit. For Americans, her story stands at the intersection of adventure and identity. She represents the part of the nation that never stops reaching, never stops wondering, and never stops daring to cross boundaries. In her leather jacket and pilot's cap, Amelia wasn't just flying, she was defining what it means to be free. Her disappearance became one of history's greatest unanswered questions. But perhaps that is why she endures, because she reflects our own nature, the desire to explore, to seek, to understand, even when the answers are hidden. Every generation looks at her and sees something different. A hero, a mystery, a dreamer, a pioneer. Yet at her core, she was something simple and universal, a human being who refused to accept limits. Today, in classrooms and documentaries, her story is told not as a tragedy but as a journey, one that never ended. Pilots speak her name before flights. Artists paint her likeness in the clouds. Filmmakers recreate her final voyage with awe and reverence. And still, somewhere deep inside, the question remains, what really happened to Amelia Earhart? Maybe that question isn't meant to be answered. Maybe it's meant to remind us that exploration always carries mystery, that some horizons are meant not to be conquered, but to inspire. Her legacy lives on in every act of bravery, in every leap of faith, in every whisper of wind that brushes the wings of a plane at dawn. She was one of the first to trust the sky completely, and the sky has never forgotten her. When night falls and the fire burns low, her voice can still be imagined, calm, steady, confident, saying that adventure is not about finding safe land, but about daring to take off. The Pacific may have kept her secret, but the world has kept her spirit. And as long as there are dreamers, as long as there are horizons, Amelia Earhart will keep flying, not just in the sky, but in the heart of everyone who still believes in impossible things.